This podcast is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever think about switching insurance companies to see if you could save some cash? Progressive makes it easy to see if you could save when you bundle your home and auto policies. Try it at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Potential savings will vary, not available in all states.
When you check out at the pharmacy, you see the journey from idea to medicine, thanks to our intellectual property system, or IP for short. IP safeguards inventions, like a new way to prevent seizures or lower cholesterol. And IP supports competition from other brands, then lower cost generics, which are 90% of prescriptions filled in the US. Innovation, competition, lower costs, thanks to IP. Learn more at phrma.org/IP works wonders.
Somehow, I've never been to the most exclusive store in New York, but today we're going to change that.
I'm not okay. Oh my God.
Hey, I'm Kate Lindsay.
And I'm Nitish Pawa, and you're listening to ICYMI.
In case you missed it.
Slate's podcast about internet culture.
And Nitish, welcome to ICYMI. How does it feel to be standing in Candice's shoes today?
It's an honor. I hope I am worthy of those shoes. That's all I can say.
I'm excited because today's episode is not something I don't think you and I ever would get into a organic conversation about. And so I'm very interested to kind of give you an education. But I think first, let's just talk more broadly. You know, there are so many different reasons to follow influencers, to follow creators. But Nitish, I'm wondering if there's anyone you follow online because of like where they're from or the city they live in or like what they represent.
You may remember when the state of Montana became the first in our great nation to try to ban TikTok downloads and discourage general use within state borders. And around that time, I reached out to Christian M. Poole, who's for a long time served as his state's unofficial representative on TikTok, mostly telling people to get out, stop watching Yellowstone and setting up your little wildcat businesses here, don't listen to Frank Zappa and set up dental floss, etc. But he was a great interview about why Montana was first to go with such a ban, which now, of course, has been kind of sort of replicated at a national level, though everyone just kind of seems to be ignoring it. But yeah, shout out to that guy who's still very much at it.
As far as I know, you wouldn't think there's any potential ban looming, but there definitely still is. But that doesn't at least affect me in terms of my favorite creators, because I realized I similarly follow a lot of people for like place-based reasons. I mentioned before in the podcast that I spent part of my childhood in England, and even though I've now lived in America for like 4 times longer than I was ever in England, anytime I follow someone online, they are probably British. Like anyone who I keep up with in like a meaningful way, I'm not interested in hearing an American person talk. I hear it all the time. And like when I am sitting down and choosing to sort of follow and listen to people, I realize they're all British.
Wow. I mean, hey, it's a good way to keep up on what's going on abroad.
Actually, my recent favorite follow is someone called Ask Charlie. She's kind of like a somewhat posh mum, and she lives in the countryside, and there's absolutely nothing about our lives that are similar. But when I was a kid, we also lived in the countryside, and I kind of just follow her because it feels like that. It feels like being home, even if, you know, our lives were very different. But speaking of home, Nitish, who comes to mind for you when I say New York City influencers?
Oh, for me, I mean, there are just a couple people I feel like who have really nailed down, I think, the spirit of New York for many people who fail to understand across the country, like New York Nico, always there with a camera to record the best of us. Obviously, there's the great interviewer of Subway Takes who went a little presidential interviewing vice presidential candidate Tim Walz last semester. They have been, I think, pretty solid representatives of the city.
Yeah, and it's interesting that already kind of the topic of today comes up in just our perceptions of the term New York City influencer, because for me, I obviously know those creators. I follow Subway Takes, love Subway Takes. But when I think of like the term New York City influencer, I think of sort of these key female players in the space, like very traditional lifestyle influencers. But I actually have trouble. I don't follow them either. So it's like interesting that they come to mind because I do not follow them. I hardly ever get their content. It's kind of like when I watch a mum in the English countryside, I can kind of escape and am in like, I imagine her life to be probably better than the reality. But when I watch a New York City influencer, I can't do that. I'm like they're on streets that I know. They're eating at restaurants I've been to. They're drinking coffee that I from a place that I'm like, I think that place is bad. So it doesn't feel like an escape. It's like I'm too close to it.
Right. Yeah, you're a little too biased, one could say. But it's okay because I am too, and I would have the exact same critiques.
But weirdly, over the past week or so, my TikTok For You page has been filled with people having a very specific debate about New York City influencers, which is whether or not they're boring. Have you seen any of this?
No, I haven't. Tell me more.
So there's this cohort of NYC influencer girlies that became the face of the discourse after they took offense to sort of an initial video that went around that called New York City influencers boring. So I want to give you a quick crash course in who these girlies are, but first, let's take a break. When we come back, I'll walk us through the drama that has the West Village quaking in its boots, and Nitish and I will discuss the question, what is a New York City influencer anyways? Oh, ICYMI listeners, do I have a scoop for you? So what is it, you ask? It's that Discover is accepted at 99% of places that take credit cards nationwide. Now, before anyone goes suggesting that this is just a rumor, know that there's actual proof that this kettle of tea is not only piping hot, but 100% true. So, yeah, sometimes it pays to be a little nosy, but it always pays to discover. Based on the February 2024 Nielsen report, learn more at discover.com/creditcard.
We're so done with New Year, New You. This year, it's more you on Bumble. More of you shamelessly sending playlists, especially that one filled with show tunes. More of you finding Geminis because you know you always like them. More of you dating with intention because you know what you want. And you know what? We love that for you. Someone else will too. Be more you this year and find them on Bumble.
And we're back. And before I introduce our cast of characters, Nitish, I want to play you a snippet from this video I mentioned that kind of started it all.
I'm ready.
All right, guys, I'm just going to say it. I hate all of the New York influencers. I think that they're boring as fuck, and they're all carbon copies of one another. They all wear the same exact fucking bracelets. They all have the same exact fucking handchains that someone else influenced them to get.
So that video is from a user called Martini Feeney. They do not appear to be any kind of professional influencer, just kind of a casual TikTok user and scroller, it seems. But the issue is that by taking offense to this video, this specific group of New York City influencers kind of told on themselves. Basically, this creator was like, boring influencer says what? And then all these influencers went, what? And then, you know, the joke's on them. Now they are kind of the faces of boring New York City influencers. But so Nitish, you've seen the clip. Have any of these creators come across your For You page? Is this still ringing no bells?
You know, I gotta say, maybe this is a testament to how well I've trained my algo at this point that I have not seen any of these. Like, when I get more like NYC specific recommendations for influencers, it's like, shout out to the City Bike Boys, which is exactly what you think it is.
Okay, I will say that honestly, these creators don't come across mine either. I'm only aware of them and like knew who this person was talking about because of the NYC Influencer Snark subreddit. But essentially, there's
there's a subreddit called Influencer Snark.
Oh my gosh, Nitish, I can't even. There's a whole world awaiting you. Yeah, wow. NYC Influencer Snark. You got to check it out.
Okay.
They'll give you a real crash course into these creators, but I'm going to do kind of a condensed version.
Fair enough. I just had to express my wow, the fact that there's a city-focused Snark channel.
They're everywhere, Nitish. I bet you could find one for Montana.
All right, yeah. I'm going to check on Billings Influencer Snark.
Yeah. But so the influencer who made herself kind of a main character in this, her name is Bridget Falong, also known as Acquired Style. And I'll be honest, I struggle to find any ways of describing her that aren't the exact things that woman said in the video. She posts lifestyle content. She works out. Her recent video shows she has a smoothie collab coming out. She's blonde, she's white, she's skinny. And so she felt seen, she felt targeted by this video. And she duetted the video and basically mock reacting to it, like doing really exaggerated, just sort of like, oh my gosh, to the sort of person talking. But she deleted it because it was called out for bullying. But even though it's deleted, it kicked off a kind of war where it's a bunch of very similar influencers really, really resenting the idea that they could perhaps be boring.
Wow.
And it's fair. They might be boring because, you know, they haven't come across Natish's For You page. They haven't crossed that crucial Natish bar.
That is true. You know, if they haven't broken through to me, they are officially boring.
I think you got to hop on and go, hey, guys, I'm here to settle this. And if I don't know about you, you are boring.
Yeah.
So the rest of this cohort, along with Danielle, they kind of started to throw themselves behind her, either through their own videos or in comments. And sort of, in general, I'll break down for you who we mean when we say, quote, NYC influencer girlies. And these are just some of them. So one is Kit Keenan. She is a former Bachelor contestant, and she is also the daughter of designer Cynthia Rowley. Hallie McGuckin. She went viral last year for being one of the victims of the New York City puncher who was going around. This was like last spring.
Oh my God, yeah. I forgot about the puncher.
Yeah, I mean, she like hopped on TikTok right after getting punched. She was like one of the people that helped raise awareness.
I definitely saw a lot of those videos. I probably saw hers too.
And so then you have her friend Jazz of Just Jazzy IDK. She hosts a podcast with Hallie. And then there's Audrey Peters. Audrey Peters went viral a few years ago. She's infamous for a deleted video in which she says she doesn't go above 14th Street. So that's Audrey.
I remember this. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, also, yeah, no wonder I don't see any of them on my feed. I definitely, like, swiped right past these.
Right. Yeah, so it's interesting. Those names, some names ring a bell, but not necessarily for the best reasons, should we say.
Right, exactly.
And it's possible they all blend together because other than Jazz, the rest of those influencers are white and blonde. All of them are straight-sized. And also 4 of them, according to a 2024 Wall Street Journal profile, are all managed by the same person. So it's Shayna Davis Ross. And I just want to read you the first paragraph from this profile of the manager. You might call Shayna Davis Ross a Dr. Frankenstein for the influencer marketing era. What she's fashioned isn't a monster exactly, but a woman with an algorithmically covetable Manhattan life. Her creation works out at Aloe Yoga's invite-only gym, grabs afternoon Aperol spritzes with her girlfriends, dines at the hottest restaurants, and always seems to have a perfect blowout. Natish, if that is not you to a T.
You know, this is like if AI were just automatically generating influencers, I feel like, in Manhattan.
Well, it's weird in general to have like an influencer formula.
Right,
and
exactly.
to then kind of have this little factory.
It's like the romantasy factories.
Right. It's just different versions of the same woman. And it's also not that they're coincidentally carbon copies. Like, that's the strategy, is that we'll just keep making the same thing. It's like the same Netflix movies coming out or whatever. On the one hand, we have these management agencies dedicated to churning out the same person over and over. And then meanwhile, creators of color, creators who aren't straight-sized, they don't get the same management, they don't get invited to the same events, and they don't get paid the same for deals. And so that is a huge factor of like who is showing up on our For You page and who isn't. But now it's starting to seem like it's backfiring. And, you know, this profile was in summer 2024. We're now in March 2025. I don't know, maybe there was like a big event that happened, something changed culturally. I'm not quite sure, but we are reacting differently to these influencers.
I think it was that Biden dropped out, right?
Yeah, and everything, yeah.
And
everyone
whatever
lost
happened
their
after that?
I don't know. Like, weirdly, there's just like a big black hole in my head when I try to think sort of past October, and then I find myself here. Obviously, it's the election. But I think what's different now, because it's not like elections have always gone our way up until this point, but influencers have kind of long provided this like aspirational escapism. Like, that's why I watch My Posh Mom in Sussex. But escapism is a little bit context dependent, especially when it's like coming from peers in a way. Like, they have to walk a fine line between what's aspirational and what just comes across as straight tone deaf. And a lot of that depends on like what is happening in the lives of the audience. And so sometimes it's these standout instances of like tripping with Tarte. I don't know if you're familiar with these sort of big influencer trips that happen.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. When they happen, there's always some sort of discourse around how are we watching sort of these people get treated to extravagance when, like, that's not happening in our daily lives. Influencers have kind of always been there for aspirational escapism, but I think that's context dependent. They have to walk this fine line between aspirational and tone deaf. So there are these standout instances, like the whole tripping with Tarte debacle that happened a few years ago. That's an example of when this line has been crossed. But the situation now is not even us reacting negatively to extravagance, but to normalcy, because it's weird to see someone be not just normal, but kind of thriving during times that really should affect everyone. You know, issues like the cost of groceries, the state of our rights. Any one of these is going to touch someone in some way. And so to then see people living kind of unaffected by all of that feels, I don't know, at best is disingenuous, but at worst, like genuinely icky. It's not even escapism anymore. It's almost like a different type of reality check. Like, we do not live in the same world somehow, even though we live in the same city. But I don't know, Nitish, have you seen anything similar happen in other communities on the internet? Sort of a post-election vibe shift?
Yeah, it's interesting. I feel like I'm seeing like a new level of shitposting, like you know, that we kind of saw during the last Trump administration as well. Where like all like my favorite like funny people, all my favorite meme creators, all my favorite like artists are like we all know what we're living under right now and how much it sucks. And so they will like make jokes about a very hyper specific part of the news cycle or just anything generally that's among our biggest fears, whether that's, you know, people literally being disappeared by the government or, you know, as you alluded to, high egg prices. So it's an interesting mix right now between like the everyday pedestrian and then like alluding to something very dark going on right now. And you could see that on TikTok. I think you could see it on Instagram too, where like a lot of places I think now are also saying like, look, if you thought I didn't care about politics before, sorry, I hate to tell you, I do care about politics and I'm going to like post jokes and observations. You can leave if you'd like.
Yeah. I see this come up a little bit, especially when there are people in like cottagecore spaces or like anything that could be remotely wellnessy. There are like, I've seen a few creators usually responding to someone saying like, oh, I wish you didn't bring politics into it. And they're like, you know, I kind of feel like as someone in this space, it feels like more important than ever that like I make clear what my politics are. And I think that's true because now suddenly, you know, being in a wellness space or being in a cottagecore space, like there are connotations. And I think, yeah, people now really feel the pressure to kind of make sure that if it does seem like they could be in any way, even quietly approving of a certain genre, you know, like the Maha people.
Right,
Maha and like wellness are a very thin line and people are trying to make clear what side of the line they are on.
Yeah, it is interesting that you see so many more spaces that were once, you know, seemingly apolitical or at the very least, like not very explicitly tied to one institution or another. Like now, once again, the battle lines are just very clearly being drawn. I think a lot of this started actually after the first Trump assassination attempt. Remember, there were like sticker companies like saying like you know, trying to cash in on, you know, the shooting attempt, and I think that's just kind of ballooned ever since.
Yeah, and it's interesting because sort of this drama, boring NYC influencers is definitely related to all this. And the discussion that's followed is honestly like the influencers are being like, you're boring, no, you're boring, and I'm not boring. And sort of we've kind of moved past that. And the question is not like, are they boring or not? The question is kind of more so, why, when people say, you know, New York City influencers, why do certain people like myself, why does the first thing that come to mind these white, blonde, skinny women who live in the West Village when New York City is so much bigger than that and there are so many other New York-based creators to follow instead? We're going to get into that, but first, let's take a break. When we come back, we'll talk about how the other New York City influencers are reacting to this drama and why we should take control of our own social media feeds.
You don't wake up dreaming of McDonald's fries. You wake up dreaming of McDonald's hash browns. McDonald's breakfast comes first. Ba-da-ba-ba-ba.
This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. Think about your favorite leaders, mentors, and idols. They don't have all the answers, but they do know when to ask questions or seek support from their community. In a society that glorifies hyper-independence, it's easy to forget that we're all better when we have a support system behind us. Therapy can be a source of support for any area of your life. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's fully online, making therapy more accessible, affordable, and convenient. BetterHelp has a diverse network of more than 30,000 credentialed therapists with a wide range of specialties. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist. If you feel like your matched therapist isn't the right one for you, you can easily switch to therapists anytime at no extra cost. Build your support system with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/ICYMI today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/ICYMI.
Eczema isn't always obvious, but it's real. And so is the relief from Ebglyss. After an initial dosing phase of 16 weeks, about 4 in 10 people taking Ebglyss achieved itch relief and clear or almost clear skin. And most of those people maintain skin that's still more clear at 1 year with monthly dosing.
Ebglyss, lebrikizumab LBKZ, a 250 milligram per 2 milliliter injection, is a prescription medicine used to treat adults and children 12 years of age and older who weigh at least 88 pounds or 40 kilograms with moderate to severe eczema, also called atopic dermatitis, that is not well controlled with prescription therapies used on the skin or topicals, or who cannot use topical therapies. Ebglyss can be used with or without topical corticosteroids. Don't use if you're allergic to Ebglyss. Allergic reactions can occur that can be severe. Eye problems can occur. Tell your doctor if you have new or worsening eye problems. You should not receive a live vaccine when treated with Ebglyss. Before starting Ebglyss, tell your doctor if you have a parasitic infection.
Searching for real relief? Ask your doctor about Ebglyss and visit ebglyss.lilly.com or call 1-800-LILY-RX or 1-800-545-5979.
And we're back. Nitish, I'm not actually sure about you, but I, if it hasn't been clear yet, am, of course, a New York City transplant.
Oh, hey, you and me both. Crazy.
When did you move here?
Late 2017, actually, when I started my job at Slate.
Oh my God, wow.
I know, right?
Wait, that's kind of crazy.
Yeah.
I've been here for 10 years this summer. I've had many jobs in between.
Congrats.
Thank you. But I always hear different numbers for like when someone is allowed to call themselves a New Yorker. Like, am I allowed to say it at 10 years or is that still?
I think 10 years is definitely more than enough time.
Yeah.
I don't even like worry about the calling myself a New Yorker aspect of it. What I worry about is, so yeah, I live in a different neighborhood now than where I did when I first moved here, which sure may be the case for you as well. But whenever I go visit my old neighborhood, you know, just out of to see friends or just like stroll down memory lane a bit, again, now I've been here nearly a decade. It's like, am I allowed to be one of those people who's like, the neighborhood's changing? When I'm absolutely one of the neighborhood changers.
I know. I think that whenever I'm in Williamsburg, because even like 10 years ago when I first moved here, I was being told like Williamsburg is not what it used to be.
Right.
And now it is like, if I'm saying it's changed, like I can't even imagine how much it is actually changed.
Yeah.
And there's some people that are of the belief that you can only really call yourself a New Yorker if you grew up here, and I will never be representative. I'm friends with certain people who've grown up here, but it's a totally different upbringing. And, you know, obviously there are, of course, New Yorkers who are white and go to Pilates and get smoothies.
Right.
But I think the issue that this debate is about is how those types of New Yorkers, those types of New York creators, they're like overly represented in our timelines compared to like what the reality of New York City is.
Right. Like if you really wanted a good, like solid representation of New York, you'd like make some wildly successful TikTok girlies out of like the restaurant owners in Jackson Heights, right?
Right. Yeah. And so that's actually related to this sort of other little snippet I want to share. This is a New York City creator I follow named Miranda Sanchez. She does these great artsy, outfitty dance videos. She kind of rarely hops on to give like, you know, front-facing video takes, but, you know, she had to for this one. And here's a little clip from it.
So this is a bit of where my frustration comes from, because we are putting down influencers that people have chosen to platform, mind you, rather than uplifting Black and brown creators that are not only creating, but influencing in a positive way.
One of the things she also says earlier in the clip is that she purposefully follows people she feels are representative of New York. Even if they're not from here, that's okay. They just are still contributing something. And so one of the sort of more positive things that's come out of this discussion is people are now highlighting other New York creators who kind of make up a fuller picture of New York City culture. And for instance, Nitish, I believe you and I are both fans of the account Shopcats.
Oh, you are correct. One of my favorite accounts, for sure.
Because this is something that always makes me feel like a celebrity if I see a Shopcat who I have actually met. Has that happened to you yet?
No, actually, which is funny.
Oh my God.
There's so many Shopcats in my neighborhood, like mine, just central Brooklyn neighborhood alone, but
yeah.
I feel like they just haven't been picked up by the feed yet.
I mean, that's good that there's we're not anywhere near done.
Oh, no. They have a long way to go. They have some great cats to meet, which is exciting because this is my exposure to other Shopcats.
Yeah. I believe we have talked about Shopcats on ICYMI before, but in case you're unfamiliar, this is basically a show where host Michelle Adana goes into different New York City bodegas. She talks to the owners about their bodega cat. She talks to the cats. One thing that I think is great about it is every video has Spanish subtitles, and often Michelle Adana, she's speaking to the owners and the employees in Spanish, which is important to highlight because Hispanic and Latino people make up around 30% of New York City's population, and yet, everything is in English. And ever since this conversation has been happening, one of my favorite things is whenever I get a new Shopcat video, I go to the comments. There's always at least one comment that's like, when we talk about boring NYC influencers, we are not talking about you. That's, I assume, both for Michelle Adana and the cats, Cats could never be boring NYC influencers.
Oh, absolutely not.
And then sort of during this conversation, I've seen a few other names get thrown around, of people who are exempt or who we don't mean when we say that New York City influencers are boring. Another one is Ayana. Her username is Ayana and then CE. And she's always, truly her videos are chaotic. She's just bopping around the city, going into stores, talking to people, getting haircuts, going to get food. And then another great New York City creator, his name is Dutch. He made a video where he was like, the realest NYC influencer girlies are not even on this app, which is definitely true. He says they're working class women who had green Metro cards. And I had to look up what that was, another sign that I am also a transplant. So I looked it up, and those are essentially student Metro cards. So that essentially, if you have one of those or you had one of those, it meant you probably grew up here. I don't think I've ever actually seen one. Have you?
The only alternatively designed Metro cards I'd ever seen were when Jesus and Mero, R.I.P., made those custom brand ones when their show was on Showtime.
Yeah, I remember that.
So that's a long way to answer that I have not seen the green ones.
And now, the art of Metro cards is kind of fading, and I am, part of the problem because I am now an omni tap to pay bitch. It's just,
man, you're one of those.
Oh my God, do you still use cards?
I still use cards.
So the point of all this is, when we say New York City influencers, there are so many other people to think of outside of the 10 women who felt targeted by that video. But a lot of this, it's not a crime to be boring. You can be boring online. It's not their fault. Really, the problem is that they're boring, and yet people chose to platform them. The reason these boring influencers are appearing on your For You page is because you follow them or you follow people like them or you watch their content. They're not being placed in front of you by the hand of God.
Yeah. No, that is a completely fair point. I think too, the issue comes across here when we're talking about the value of metrics. When you're feeding into an algorithm like TikTok's, right? They're not counting your full head views and engagements and stitches as they were actually using this to dunk on them, right?
Right.
They're just counting it as, you're engaging with them. And we like it when people spend time on our videos. So even if you hate this, we'd prefer you hate watch instead of not watching at all.
Yeah, that is how you can end up on the wrong side of TikTok, quote unquote, where it's TikTok doesn't understand that tons of people are watching your video because they're mad at you.
Right.
They just are these types of people spend a long time on this video. Great, here's more of them.
And I mean, to be fair, the non-podcast media industry, are we immune to this? Absolutely not. A page view and a click is a page view and a click. I hate
Oh
to
my
say
God,
it.
yeah. Yeah. I know, and I'm definitely guilty of this too, but especially when I was on Twitter. This tweet that really got me when it was posted was someone, quoting the phrase that myself and other people on Twitter would say all the time, which is like, Twitter is a hell site.
Right.
And then it's basically like, my brother in Christ, you follow the accounts, which is basically like, oh, if you're having a bad time on Twitter, it's because you are choosing to have a bad time on Twitter by like who you've selected to follow. I don't know. This is something that I think is because of algorithms, and I'm curious about your take. Like, why don't people seem to acknowledge their role and what shows up for them online anymore? Like, why have we kind of like preemptively given up all agency?
But I do think also part of it comes down to when like the earliest days of Facebook, earliest days of Twitter, and now like if you're on Blue Sky, etc. It was all like chronological, right? It was like tightly controlled, like who you saw and like the things that you would interact with within that ecosystem, or like the people you like very purposefully engaged with, saw them engaging with, and then went forward from there. And then once these algorithmic recommendations and feeds like started really taking over, I think what happened was there was quite a bit of a black box effect, right? Yeah. And part of the reason that TikTok is, as popular as it is compared with like, the wasteland that Facebook is now, is that like they have like this special secret sauce algorithm that's a secret, right? Like they don't, give away the formulas. They don't open source that stuff to other people. And I think it can still be a little freaky to see what like may pop up because you picked like one thing over the other. I mean, YouTube has one of like the worst algorithms out there of any major service. And I'm not even just saying that in like the watch one politics video and you get like swarmed with Jordan Peterson. I mean, just more like truly you will get just like the most inexplicable recommendations just out of nowhere. And I'm like looking at my browsing history is like, I have no idea what I watched that would make you think I would want to see that. So I think there is a thing where we want to, have more control over our feeds, but at the same time, again, we don't know fully how these algorithms work, and it's a little freaky. And yeah, I mean, it took me a long time with TikTok, as I mentioned earlier, because for the longest time, it would just be like, I don't know, like high schoolers doing dances, and I didn't want to see that.
Yeah, I think we hand over a lot of, well, because we're told like, oh, this algorithm, it's so mysterious and it's so powerful. And you do hear stories, like the classic one is people being like, my algorithm figured out I was gay before I did. Like we really kind of like hand over this almost like God-like power to the algorithm. But then I think in situations like this creates a little bit of a learned helplessness because you do have options to be in charge of the content you want to see. Like more so in the case of when you're getting on and being like, wow, NYC influencers are boring. And it's like, you can actually follow people, you can unfollow them, you can block them, you can get the content that you think is boring and say that you're not interested. And I think another part of this is just what people say they want when asked about themselves, and then what they're like, id brain behavior suggests can be very different, especially when you're scrolling. Like we were saying, like hate watching is a thing and a view is a view. And so I think even if we're like, oh, these NYC influencers are so boring, I wish they weren't all over my feed. But then one shows up and you might watch it all the way through because you just want to watch the whole time and be like, yeah, boring, hate them. And then that doesn't matter. They're just going to show up more on your feed.
Yeah, no, that's a great point too, because the algorithm is also, especially the recommendation one, is also dictated by what other people are inputting, right? And so many of like the single biggest creators, whether they're on TikTok or YouTube or elsewhere, they're more and more like trying to hack engagement, optimize to where they break through the entire morass, right? Which is millions and millions of videos. So it's like if they can figure out how to rack up like the most like outrage or shock or seeming novelty or even just like way to get like people feeling all smug about themselves and like dunking on something. Like, it doesn't matter because you did it. You broke through, and that's what you were supposed to do.
Right. So, Nitish, we've thrown around a lot of names today, some good, some bad. I want to know if, I know you've mentioned some earlier, so it might be one of those, but is there a creator who you love or you know of who, when I say New York City influencer, you think is a good one, it should be the one that people turn to?
This goes back to what we were talking about earlier, right? Like, who is the NYC influencer? What is this stand-in for New York City? Like, even when we're talking something about shop cats, that's like a very specific influence, right? Yeah. But all that being said, I do have some folks who I really think do just really represent a lot of what I think of as New York City. And one of them I really gotta give a shout out, the All Day NYC. They're like a ton of the dirt bike, e-bike riders who are, they're just like recording their like everyday like travails through the streets, right? On different sorts of like portable mobility devices, whether doing like a one-wheeler or like a fancy scooter or something else.
Are these the ones where it's kind of harrowing to watch?
Yeah, it can feel somewhat harrowing to watch. Yeah.
I think my husband watches these because it's harrowing.
Yeah. And I mean, they'll sometimes show you they're just like going straight through the snow, which is when I don't even want to bike through the snow, but they're doing it. And I think it's just fascinating as like such a good representation of what the streets of New York do look like when, like, if you're not in a car, you're not in the subway, and you're not walking, like, how do you get around New York City? What sorts of features, amenities are there for you to get around using, and where are they located? I think it's a really remarkable thing, and I think it spotlights parts of the city that I think don't always get as much love and appreciation. What about you?
Yeah, I would say I think that's what it is. It's like, okay, we've seen Carbone. We've seen like Aloe, Pilates or whatever. It's like, I want to be shown like things that I wouldn't normally come across. Like, I don't want to have that thing where I'm like, I know that coffee place sucks or whatever. It's like, I like to see new things. And so she's not as active anymore. But when it was active, I really loved this woman behind an account called Got to Go. And her whole thing was like,
that was the public restrooms, right?
Yes. Basically what she would do is just go in and provide the bathroom codes for like the Barnes and Noble or like other like big places, because there's not enough public restrooms in New York, and public restrooms should be accessible and they should be free. Like we all do it. And so her whole thing was like kind of using her privilege as sort of just like a white brunette walking into like hotels and being like, can I use your restroom? And see what, and like she'll report back like, this is the code, or like, yes, you can use the restroom here, or like, this one is really, you don't need to ask anyone, this one is over here. And so I thought that was really great. And then a recent woman I followed, her name is Seda. She makes these great comedy videos, like just like character videos, and she's not like huge yet. She will be, because she's had some big viral moments, and the one that got me was basically girl who is secretly happy her neighborhood is getting gentrified. And she's a native New Yorker, and so she's like seen this a lot, where it's like, I love a cute wine bar, I hate that the wine bar has to come at the expense of like my neighbor. Is like it just is, it's really funny, and it does a good job of like capturing that weird tension that feels very, she's in New York, but it also just feels very specifically New York, having, been here for 10 years and being like, oh my God, cute new shop. And then it's like, oh no, cute new shop.
Oh, amazing. Those are good ones.
The thing is, and maybe this is good, I don't think I've convinced you to follow any of these NYC influencer girlies. Are you even curious?
I am curious, if only because I've learned that it's in the hard way in like the post-COVID era, that it's very important to know how other people are perceiving New York based on ambassadors like this. And I think I'm gonna have to like keep tabs for next time I get like a bizarre question about the city that I don't know where someone got that from.
Yeah, they definitely got it from like Acquired Style or something like this. If you were tasked with becoming an NYC influencer, not even an NYC influencer girly, they were just like, you, Nitish, are an influencer now.
Well, I'm more than happy to be an influencer girly, to be clear.
Okay, perfect. What would you post? Like, what do you think your like beat would be?
Maybe to fill in the Got to Go NYC niche. Like, I think she did an amazing service for us. God bless her. But What I would do is something a little more forward-facing, which is where I would imagine the spaces where it would be perfect to install a new public restroom.
Ooh, yeah, and like point them out.
Exactly, yeah. I could take a little picture of the spot and then get someone way more design savvy than I am to like do a rendering of like, okay, what might a little plumbing outpost here look like?
Wow, and that is influencing. Like people could in a world take you up on that, and then you are, I think, a bathroom influencer.
You know, I would love nothing more.
Okay, that's the show. We'll be back in your feed on Saturday, so definitely subscribe. That way you never miss an episode. Please leave us a rating and review in Apple or Spotify and tell your friends about us. You can follow us on Twitter at ICYMI_pod, and you can always drop us a note at ICYMI@slate.com. ICYMI is produced by Candice Lim and me, Kate Lindsay. Thanks to Kevin Bendis for his help with this episode.
Daisy Rosario is our senior supervising producer, and Hillary Fry is Slate's editor-in-chief. See you online.
Or in a Natish-approved public restroom.
That's right.